decided this panel lineup? They would put me behind Cassandra and Gloria. My portion of this panel tends to be difficult for the average person to listen to because it's a discussion about today. And so most people appreciate hearing about the past because then they're not responsible for anything. But when you have to deal with contemporary conditions, then the protests begin. But I shall proceed. We need to remember that our ancient culture hails from countries and civilizations that existed before time immemorial, where love was always expressed and taught, and our socialization processes and our human development methods were superior. When African people landed at Point Comfort, present-day Hampton, and you've heard from my senior colleague there, emphasize senior, right? In latter August of 1619, they landed in a socioeconomic environment of a settler colony. And you've heard that this colony of England was meant to serve England. Never, and Sister Gloria laid this out, never was their intention for this settler colony to become a multiracial, multinational society. That was never the intent. Through the domination of native people and through a violent cultural, political warfare perpetuated upon people of African descent, through relentless systemic and barbaric mechanisms, 400 years later, we do not own our environment. Our community exists in an economic, political ecosystem that we do not control, we don't own. An ecosystem that absolutely denies our ability to live life on our cultural terms. Enslavement reduced us only to laborers, but also to products of a settler colony, perpetuated upon white supremacy and perpetuates a white supremacist paradigm. And so this notion of products, of black people serving as caricatures because it benefits the political economy, is a product of enslavement. Prior to enslavement in traditional African culture, marital unions were created to advance economic well-being and to extend the extended family structures and to extend the clan. Marriages were not only viewed as social unions, they were political and economic relationships, with women still maintaining their ties to their family of origin. The unnatural system of enslavement disrupted those marital patterns, resulted in manifested trauma of problematic relationships and family patterns that we witness today. If you recall, many of us read Naim Akbar's Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery that came out in '96. We've read Wade Nobles' work. We have read my mentor, Dr. Dawood Yazebo, who created a nosology where he attends to cultural misorientation behaviors. And also, we are aware of Dr. Joy DeGrew's post-traumatic slave disorder, which is foundational in my very brief discussion, explicating behavior and family patterns that emanate from 246 years of chattel slavery. An analysis of current marital and family patterns using the post-traumatic slave disorder diagnosis uncovers how embedded behavioral patterns emanate from the enslavement process. I am not offering you a discussion in cultural pathology, nor am I offering you a discussion in dysfunction. Those are terms that are meant to label people genetically. Those are terms I reject. My research shows, for example, that here in the city of Hampton, and I wrote a book called Hampton, Virginia in 2005, and researching about the Black community in Hampton, what I discovered is that court records in Hampton shows that right after the Civil War, over 90% of the marriages in Hampton, Elizabeth City County at the time, were Black people getting married. Also from my research, I learned how Black people created vibrant, sustaining, independent, you all know this, communities and institutions, agencies, churches, businesses, benevolent organizations, secret societies that undergirded our cultural beingness. We did this despite the trauma of chattel slavery. In fact, even today, we observe a strong working class tradition in our community. And many of those persons who are of the working class traditions are sending their children to HBCUs. HBCUs today are teaching exclusively first-generation Black students because those parents of that strong working class tradition who did not have an opportunity for an education are entrusting HBCUs to do the job. That deserves a hand. So I'm not speaking about cultural pathology, nor am I speaking about dysfunction. But as we consider this theme of 400 years of perseverance, what then does this mean with regards to family relationships and formal marital relationships between men and women, with implications of how we attend to trauma as we move forward? Dr. Joy DeGroo's post-traumatic slave disorder explains that it's a condition that exists when a population has experienced multi-generational trauma resulting from centuries of slavery and continues to experience oppression and institutionalized racism today. And added to this condition is a belief that the benefits of the society in which they live are not accessible to them. So what do we do about this? We go back to the beginning. Our human collective spiritual development as a people is often severely truncated due to the ma'afa. The ma'afa is a Kiswahili term developed by Dr. Marema Ani that describes incomprehensible destruction. So if you consider 246 years of chattel slavery, another 100 years of violent racial segregation, and another 49 years of what I call a repressive, controlled, racial policy-based post-segregation era. This means, my friends, that we are still living in the ma'afa today. Acute and chronic exposure to racism, white supremacy, and race hatred, systemic behavior in every social institution, and in every social policy passed since 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, in an inequitable social and economic system that perpetuates an underclass system, keeps us in the ma'afa. What do we do about it? Models and practices that attend to the trauma are foundational to developing those models and theories within the African worldview. Dr. Wade Nobles reminds us that the African worldview is based upon sharing, mutual responsibility, living in harmony with one another, and survival of the community. We have to commandeer sacred spaces meant for a sustaining, nurturing, healing, and helping environment, because systems of employment, education, commerce, and policy and power are controlled by whites. I offer these suggestions with the goal of optimally engendering non-oppressive social functioning to eradicate the impact and effects of racism, neocolonialism, and poverty. I also offer that we need to invest more in community development practices. Community practices are indispensable to transforming the environmental landscape where impoverished Black people reside, attend school, worship, raise their children, engage in recreation, while simultaneously negotiating crime, police brutality, environmental hazards, food deserts, decrepit economic outlets, health and mental health challenges, as well as tyrannically dominating systems of public welfare and indifferent public education system, child support enhancement and enforcement, correction, and law enforcement. Just a couple of helping modalities that are grounded in the African-centered approach I'd like to offer to you today. And I also would like to say that there are organizations who've been engaged in this work since the 60s, the National Association of Black Social Workers and the National Association of Black Psychologists. I offer that we have to teach models of behaviors, of interdependence and mutual sharing with spiritual systems that provide instruction that appeal to our cultural being. I offer that we have to develop community families who are specially trained in cultural, mental health, and Black family practices, preservation practices of our culture, kinship, and mutual obligation practices. I offer that we need for-profit helping corporations to produce revenue for this healing work that we need to engage in. I offer that we need foundation development to underwrite these cultural efforts because governmental entities like NIH, the NIMH, Community Development Block Grants are simply not going to fund these efforts.
That's right.
I offer that we need to recognize and include healing exercises with our impoverished people and ground those exercises in African spirituality because marginalization and oppression have created not only alienation from wider society, but cultural alienation. I offer that we need to teach value systems, such like the Nguzo Saba, that are organic to our culture, and infuse those principles within helping modalities. The answer to post-traumatic slave disorder is the reclamation of African culture as key to our survival and the positive existence of people of African descent. And until a reckoning that is absolutely required of all of us, we will continue to render ourselves powerless in the face of trauma. Ashe.